Try that again with the mic on. Being 1 o'clock, I'm going to call the subcommittee work session for Senate Bill 282 to order. And just a little bit of background, which everybody may know, but so we had House Bill 1192 on this subject that passed the House. It went to the Senate. It passed the Senate and their committee, and then the full Senate passed it on consent yesterday. So this bill is, after going through, the enrolled bill process, will be going to the governor, and I don't see any reason why he wouldn't sign it. And then we got Senate Bill 282, which is this work session was for, and the intent had been for it to be identical to 1192. There's one sentence that's different. I came here with an amendment. We can discuss other options with an amendment, but all that amendment did would be to make the two identical. But after talking to the chair, Carol McGuire, she said, if, rather than do that, if we're fine with what was in 1192, the best thing would just be to ITL Senate Bill 282, because we don't need two bills on the same topic. So anybody else in the subcommittee want to say anything?
I agree with that assessment, although if there are changes that we want to make to the statute, we could do so. We could use this bill as a vehicle to do that, but we would have to write a contingency such that whatever we pass out of our committee only takes effect after.
Right. Actually, yeah, Carol said that. She said if we want to make further changes, her suggestion would be to have an amendment to replace all of 282 and had a later effective date than 1192. So, yeah. So there wouldn't be a question of which one took precedence. So thanks.
Yeah, well, you can make the effective date whatever you want and then put or 1 minute after House Bill 1182 takes effect.
Sure.
Later. And that's how all that takes care of this.
Okay. All right.
And I would recommend that we start with 1192, since that's the thing that's passed both bodies.
I agree. Yeah.
I agree with that.
And rather than trying to, because to me, 282, we did a significant amount of work to this bill, 1192. And I think we should look at that. And if we need to amend that, then we have turned this, use that as Senate Bill 282 and pass it with a date that will. Okay.
All right. I agree.
Okay,
So, yeah, so we should work off of 282 or 1192, sorry. Okay. So, sure.
Can you explain to me how two of you, your group and your group interact? To me, you're all one group, but apparently.
Actually, if you can turn the mic on and have the mic quite close to your mouth.
So I'm Molly Gendro, and I represent the association, the New Hampshire Acupuncture and Asian Medicine Association.
And I'm Diane Chase, a vice chair on the New Hampshire Acupuncture Licensing Board.
You need to turn it on. Yeah.
I represent myself as an acupuncturist who's been impacted by our law dramatically and negatively, and that's why I approached to try and make the changes that I want.
I'm Elizabeth Ropp. I'm a community acupuncturist. There are no community acupuncturists who sit on the licensing board, so there's no one who represents my coworkers and myself. We have a distinctive approach of doing things. I'm with the People's Organization of Community Acupuncture. We have a different approach than, say, private room acupuncturists, and so there are aspects of this law that make it hard for people to get licensed in New Hampshire. We want to make that easier, like reciprocity easier.
Could you briefly give us some idea of the difference between what a community acupuncture is versus other types?
Yes, I'm happy to. So in community acupuncture clinics, instead of putting patients in a single room by themselves and treating them on a treatment table, we have an open community space. We're often treating patients in reclining chairs. It's like a big living room. And we mostly use distal points to treat patients. So if you were to come in, say, and get a treatment for your back, I wouldn't put the needles directly in your back. I would just have you sit in a reclining chair, roll up your pant legs to your knees, your sleeves to your elbows, and I would use points in your arms and hands, legs and feet, head and ears to treat your back pain, you know, using the meridians that run through your back. And what we do is we do this at a reduced cost. So how much is private room acupuncture? Can you want to give a range?
How much?
Turn it on. Yeah.
I'm sorry.
And I've
Can
got yours
range
here for
anywhere
you, too.
from $55 to $125.
So a private room clinic might be $55 to $155. $125. So the clinic where I work, we charge a sliding scale of $20 to $40. Patients choose what they want to pay. There's we're just a different group. We just have a different approach. And we tend to be bigger clinics with more practitioners, keeping open flexible hours.
So just, and also, if people aren't speaking, turn your mics on if they're off, because more than 3 are on, no further. And so what I'm getting at is, I mean, you said you're not using needles, so it's just a matter of.
No, I'm using needles.
I don't know some of those terms that you're using. Is it a matter? I thought you said you weren't in those types.
She can put them in the back,
Oh, not in the back.
the different meridians of the leg.
Okay. I don't necessarily know what meridians of the leg are, and you got to assume that we know nothing other than I know what a needle is.
So in the community, if I could speak, in the community acupuncture room, people are in recliner chairs in
Yeah.
their clothes. Like when I was trained to put somebody into a hospital gown and then have them lay on the table.
Yeah.
Right? And that's frequently how private room acupuncture happens.
Okay.
But in community, you're not taking your clothes off in the group.
All right, thank you. One thing what we can do here, as you said, as was said, start with 1192. I don't know if anybody in the committee feels there need to be changes, but we could deal with that first, and then what I'd like to do is, we can talk about any other this proposed amendment or other changes with respect to 1192. And could you introduce yourself, the person who came in?
Yes, sir. My name is Vicki Irwin. I'm a licensed acupuncturist in New Hampshire, a member of the State Association as well as the Acupuncture Licensing Board.
Okay. Yeah, for the record.
Vicki Irwin, IRWIN.
You have to speak with the microphone like this.
You have to
Sorry.
sort of eat it, almost.
My name is Vicki Irwin. I'm a licensed acupuncturist here in New Hampshire, as well as a member of the State Association and the Acupuncture Licensing Board.
Okay, thank you.
But you're representing yourself.
Yes.
Okay.
Anybody on the subcommittee want to say anything before we open it up to, yes, Representative Marsh?
I would like to ask a question. Just,
Here, Mike.
oh, I gotta get a mic, okay.
I mean, we're kind of close together, but it's
A
recorded.
question so that I can understand. This Board of Acupuncture licensing draft legislation, that comes from your group. Right. Have you guys seen it? Will you share it with them?
Okay. Anything else from anyone on the subcommittee? Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I just want to, I looked through the 1192 and the changes that were made by the Senate to me made 1192 a hybrid between 1192 and 282. Would anybody else concur that that's what happened?
The Senate didn't change 1192 after it left our committee.
So okay, so these are the changes that it left our committee with.
That's correct. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Right. Representative Marsh brought forward an amendment that was
Okay.
intended to make 1192 the same as 282. There's one sentence that somehow ended up being different.
Right. We were asked by the board to make an additional change, which we incorporated in our amendment at the time. So that's where we left it.
Okay, and what change was that? Do you know? I can't keep track. I'm just trying to figure out which change.
Yes, it's, in fact, if you look at the amendment that Representative Lakis brought forward, this was the additional change that we made to 1192 after, while it was in our committee.
Right. I mean, there's, one of them is a word order change that isn't, I don't think, significant, but the key is it adds at the end there, let's hold a valid license to practice acupuncture from another, no, that's not the one. It's got another, it's got NCCAOM, including its successors or predecessors. It's, the main change is adding that, including its successors or predecessors, which was in other places in 282 and 1192, but it wasn't, one was not covered. And so that's what this was intended to fix.
Mr.
Yes.
Chair, can I make a suggestion?
Certainly.
Can I suggest we look at the board's draft here, start at the beginning and see which sections are already in what is passed, what things might be new, and whether we think that this is a reasonable change or whether we think it's something that really ought to have a public hearing and be a bill next year.
Okay. If, as far as a way of doing it, if you'd like to go through it, and then
I would like to do it that way because I think that will
No.
accomplish what we're doing.
I think
Draft.
that's a good idea.
So looking at this draft legislation, the first part seems to change the word Oriental to the word Asian in a number of places. Does anyone have any objection to that?
I'm taking a look at 1192, and I look through here and I'm not seeing. Oh, so this is changing other parts of the RSA.
That's right.
Then what's
They're
touched?
asking us to change some other parts of the
Yeah,
RSA,
yeah.
which would be germane.
Certainly.
Okay. And if they want to change Oriental to Asian, I don't have any objection to doing that. Since it costs the state of New Hampshire about $10,000 to bring a bill forward, if we can do that now, we end up saving the state money, and
Sure.
particularly if it's a relatively minor thing like that. So
Right.
I would certainly be in favor of doing that sort of a change if that's what people want to do.
I agree. And looking through the part one, that's all that's in there. And in part two, section 2 in subsection 4, that's what's there. And then in 6, actually, is this one changed in our bill, G2?
Well, section
Go
1
on.
is new. Section 2 is new, which also changes Oriental to Asian and adds the change to ACA, HM, and NCCAOM, and including its predecessors and successors. Again, I don't see those as being anything that anyone objects to.
No. And so we're going through here. If anybody has a problem with any of these, let us know. So.
Right. If we go to section 3, the significant change there, I believe, is already in what was passed, which says no more than 2 section terms. That is in section 3 of the bill that's already passed. Is there any difference here between what we've already passed?
I'm going to ask about section 3, Roman numeral 1, number 1, where we strike out BNCCAOM.
Is this in our bill or their proposed?
No, I'm looking at their bill.
Okay.
Yes, that is
And
in,
hold a current valid license to practice acupuncture.
that's in 1192 on page 1, lines 14 through 17.
Okay, it's just.
So I
okay,
believe this whole
okay.
section 3 is something that's already been done.
Yep, agree.
So that I don't think.
Moving on to section 4. I believe that this section, again, is something that we've already addressed. I'm looking for exactly where.
I think it's at the beginning, section 1 of the bill. Deals with 329
9G9.
maybe.
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah.
Yep.
Actually, all that the bill does is, for that section, is it changes. What does this actually change? Okay, yeah, we've got the change. E12. Why does it?
Okay, so the section 4 of the amendment that we received is similar to page,
Right, it's got the, on A, reach age of majority, that's fine, and B,
it
Yeah.
has the NCAOM certification or equivalent.
right,
It talks about the licensing fee. It talks about professional character, and up to line 10, whose requirements are substantially equal to or exceed the requirements of. So section 4 is in the bill that passed the Senate.
In
From-
section 4.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Exactly.
and even going down, the apprenticeship is looking to
Correct.
be basically
Correct.
similar.
Okay, but the B has a major problem. It actually took out the very point of what I initiated.
Which one?
Line B, what was originally struck was the current active.
No, it's right here. It has current active NCAOM certification.
Yeah, we want to strike current active because that requires that we pay dues to our trade organization in addition to our license.
Well, it says or equivalent certification.
Approved by the board. yeah.
It's just the current active. Great, people should be NCCA certified.
Oh,
But if you don't pay the dues, they will not turn out your test results, so you can't get licenses in other states after a certain amount of time. And I am required to pay a state licensing fee and more for that NCACAM active status.
I hear what you're saying. Would not the board be able to approve prior NCCAOM certification that may not be current and active as equivalent certification if the board so desire?
Can you please repeat that?
Oh, we've already inserted into statute here, or equivalent certification approved by the board.
Correct.
What is being contended here is that we should strike the words current active so that one only has to be NCCAOM certified. Now, as an alternative, which would not require any change in statute, would not the board be able to accept an NCCAOM certification that is not current because they didn't pay their dues as being equivalent, if they so desire?
NCCAOM also requires a certain amount of continuing education, which is then mirrored in quite a lot of the rest of this bill. So I do believe maintaining it is important.
Understood. So you could have some other maintenance of certification process that you approved, that if they did that and had a prior NCCAOM certification, that could at least hypothetically be acceptable to the board.
Right, or it might not even require prior NCCM certification. They could have whatever they
The
want.
board could decide whatever they want, basically.
Okay, so two things. The paragraph about CEUs, the chair of the licensing board has contested what's in here because it implies that you can only get it through NCCOM CEUs. Okay, so what's in here right now, I believe, is one of the things that she would like to change. That's number one. Number two, current active status. If you've been certified, you have passed the test. So why you have to maintain and pay dues when you've already passed the test to prove your credibility and your competence? Why I should pay more than my licensing fee every year for that, I don't know. And I will further explain that the last course I took for those CEUs was in astrology from the NCCAOM website. So from here on out, I'm taking astrology classes because they offer a lot of them. So the New Hampshire citizens can be protected from me because I have learned astrology, okay?
Actually, and
But we've had the same argument with medical licenses, and I had a bill to that effect a couple of sessions ago. So I hear what you're saying, but I did not prevail in getting the bottom line was the public determined that some sort of continuing education was considered in the public interest, and I respect that.
Yeah, I agree. We require in New Hampshire by law 30 CEUs every 2 years. So that's fine. But paying the current active status fee, that is
So-
the problem.
actually, I have a question. So does the board have anything specified for continuing education other than that required to maintain current active NCCAOM certification. So is there another option?
Has been the position all along in the law, and the board
No,
has
I'm
the authority
asking
to
right
approve
now,
them.
has the board approved any other?
There are other ways to obtain your CEUs. There are a number of other courses that can be approved by the board and accepted as appropriate continuing education. However, I would also caution that astrology courses won't keep your NCCAOM current because there are ethics courses and safety courses part of the requisites as well.
Okay, but are there any alternatives to NCCOM that the board has currently approved, or are there people who are licensed based on that, or is this just, if someone asked, you could do it?
To my knowledge, we've not been asked to do that. NCCAOM has been a pretty standard
Well, right now it's,
across the board requirement.
Mr. Chair?
yes.
Yeah, I believe that we need to phrase this slightly differently because existing law that we're trying to amend here
Right.
currently says that they have to have a current active NCCAOM certification. But we're adding into the
No.
law or the equivalent certification phrase.
Right, I get that.
So they're going to have to rewrite their rules. And the question is, are they going to rewrite their rules to allow alternative forms of continuing education, which I believe is the intent here.
Right. I see another thing here in 1192 on page 2 near the bottom on lines 35 and 36. It's under continuing education. It says maintaining current active NCCM certification shall fulfill the continuing education requirement, and it doesn't offer any alternative down here. Yes.
So this is, thank you. This is reminding me of the discussion that we had 4 years ago, because one of the points that several acupuncturists were making at the time was that the NCCAOM was the only recognized test and licensing, and that's when we started this or equivalent. And that was accepted by both bodies. And then that was a House Bill 1314. That was one of the big points of 1314. And that bill passed the House and went to the Senate and got lost during COVID. So when I saw this, I thought that was one of the important things. So if we're saying that we're going to have NCAOM certification or equivalent, we have to make sure that policy carries out throughout the bill.
Right, and it looks like it doesn't
Correct.
in section 5. And you had a comment?
Okay. A couple different things. So it's been in our statute all along that we need current active status with the NCCAOM, but it's also in our statute that we need 30 CEUs every 2 years to renew our New Hampshire licenses. And so that's 60 CEUs every 4 years, which is exactly what we need for NCCAOM. So I've had people turn in letters saying that it's completely redundant and burdensome on a small business owner to have to keep this NCCAOM certification in addition to keeping a New Hampshire license. They're already completing the same amount of CEUs for New Hampshire and submitting the proof and the certificates, and then submitting the same proof and certificates to the NCCAOM, this national agency, when we've already passed their tests.
Right, and actually, it looks like, I mean, even if we think the rest of the bill's fine, there's an inconsistency because to get certification, it appears there could be options other than NCCOM, but the way the bill's written, NCCOM certification is the only way to get renewed. So that is definitely a problem.
And I believe in the rules, California CEUs are accepted in New Hampshire. That's correct. So it's not just NCCAOM approved CEUs. Also, if we're adding or equivalent certification, if we're accepting someone to New Hampshire who's taken the California acupuncture licensing exam as their equivalent, are they then expected to maintain an active license in California as their equivalent approved certification that mirrors NCCAOM? That wouldn't make sense. It's just you've taken a test, either NCCAOM or equivalent, and right now that's the Cali, and then you maintain your CEUs for the state of New Hampshire. And then if you want to pay NCCAOM, if you feel there's benefit to NCCAOM, then that should be a choice, not a mandate by law.
Can I make a suggestion? Because I hear both sides here, and I think that you're making valid points. Why don't we add at the end of section 5, where right now we've struck some language from the statute, including the 30 continuing education hours that was just mentioned. And the sentence is maintaining current active NCCAOM certification shall fulfill the continuing current education requirement. Why don't we add a sentence right there? The board shall adopt rules regarding alternative means of fulfilling the continuing education requirement, particularly since they already have that in the rules.
That is in the board's amendment. That is the language. As I said, the chair is for this. She testified
Where
for
is
this.
it in the amendment?
X on page 4 of the board's amendment. As a conditional renewal of license, the board shall require each licensee to show proof of having completed for each biennial period continuing education at approved institutions or as approved by the board. Okay, and the board does approve other CEUs. Every year there's an annual meeting. Elizabeth and I both served as board members on the association in the past. And I attended and got CEUs at annual meetings sponsored by the association, approved by the board. So yes, that does happen.
So if we were to take this language in the middle of towards the bottom of page 4, number 10, and use that to replace the language in the bill for section 5,
Yeah, that's what we asked for
everybody would be
originally.
happy.
Yes, everyone?
Yeah.
All right, let's do that. That's a good plan.
You're sort of driving the detail here. Would you be willing to request the amendment?
I'd be glad to do the amendment here if you
Okay.
would like me to do so, yes, as long as we reach consensus at the end of the day.
Obviously. Yeah, I mean, probably the thing to do is to have at the end, maybe have a marked up copy of 1192 or something, and then we can just review it, and then the subcommittee can vote on whether we recommend that, is what I would suggest.
Right, my only issue is that my laptop wouldn't boot this morning, so I,
Mine will.
okay, we'll do it.
Excuse me.
So
Because
did bring
I
my
just
laptop.
don't want to end this with a misunderstanding and further
All right, so
disagreement.
we got through this section 5 here. Actually, we were using the board's language to go through. Section 5 of the board's language, is that already included?
Where is that?
Well,
That's,
we just go through on section 10.
well, let's look back at it. 328 G9.
Oh, I see.
That
The next section of their proposed amendment is the certified acupuncture detoxification specialist. My recollection was this was already in the bill, and Elaine is shaking her head yes.
we're looking on their amendment where?
Their amendment
Page.
where they, 328 G9A to read as follows.
So which page on theirs? It's,
That's at the bottom of page 4.
okay.
And Elaine is saying this is already in what was passed by the House and the Senate. And I'm just looking for where to make sure that it is in fact there.
Well, it wouldn't have been in this amendment, right?
Yeah, what I
But
should have,
this is the current, what they did, they took the current status.
yeah, I didn't print out the current statute, which I probably should have done.
But they're not changing anything in the current statute.
Except on the next
Okay,
page.
but that general supervision is also on the back of 1192. And that was part of, so that's already in there.
Yes. Yep. Okay, so we don't need their section 5 at all.
Okay? Does anybody think we need this section 5? No. So we'll say not needed. Okay,
Scope of practice.
scope of practice.
Oh, that's just correcting the-
Here we're just
That's
changing
an Asian, yeah.
Oriental to Asian.
Yep.
So I think that's fine.
Yep.
Now, I have a real problem with changing the dentistry statute as part of this. Because that makes it a non-germane amendment and that creates lots of issues.
I think we should just Could we just like not take that out of the, okay, good, so we're not gonna look at that.
So we're just going to say no for section 7 and 8 because we're not going to do that.
Yeah.
And at the end, we have to have a contingency. Okay, well, let me
And
suggest,
then we also have to have, so this bill, adopted takes place 90 days after its passage.
yes,
So we want to have this new amendment take place,
1 minute after the adoption of 1192.
is that how you're going to write it?
What I would like to do is, because we have a couple new sections, where section 1 is new, section 2 is new,
Right.
and we are changing the paragraph on page 4 in the middle, which is replacing what's already in the bill, and number 6 is new. So if we create a whole replace all bill to take effect 1 minute after what just passed the Senate,
Yeah.
with just those changes, that will work.
And there's a question?
It's a comment. The way that this is written, the current active NCCM certification, I do not believe the board has the authority to ignore that the way that it is being interpreted. Yes. If you leave current active NCCM certification in there,
Well, we could say, it's this part right here. Can we just say has NCAOM certification or equivalent? Has NCCAOM or equivalent certification? Yeah, just take that. That would work. No, down here.
Well, the way it's read, it says has current NCCM equivalent certification or equivalent certification approved by the board. So that gives them the
She
authority.
doesn't
to
like
approve.
the word current active because it's
yeah.
the word current active because right, it implies that you have to have current active NCAOM certification.
Except the or,
Okay.
if you're using the right-hand side of the or, then the left-hand side is completely irrelevant. I'm not opposed to remove, well, here's the problem, and why I'm not sure it's good to remove that. What this is saying is that you have two options here. One is you have some equivalent certification approved by the board, and that's fine. Or you have NCCAOM certification, but, you know, if you had gotten the certification a long time ago and it isn't currently active, that means you haven't had ongoing training for that and you haven't kept up and you're doing that instead of some equivalent approved by the board. So I don't know that that's
every
right.
state requires CEUs,
Right.
period, whether you're NCCM certified or not. And not all states require NCCOM. A number do not. And maybe the majority do not require active current status.
All right.
So, Mr. Chair, and I'm going back because this is like bringing me back. So in House Bill 1314,
Yep.
we struck out current active.
Okay.
So we has NCCAOM certification or equivalent certification approved by the board or has successfully passed the California Acupuncture licensing examination through examination or credential document review. So we had taken the
Okay,
words
all right.
current active out
I'm
before.
fine with that. And I presumably we don't need the or California thing because the board could accept that if they wanted.
Correct.
All right.
That's right.
Is that any issue with that?
I'm not quite sure I understand all of it, but California is now requiring NCCAOM. They moved towards that. The earlier argument
don't
of
think they're
needing to
requiring it.
duplicating your submissions for your CEUs, if you have your NCCAOM active and current, the license, this actually made it a little bit easier for a number of constituents because you didn't have to strictly adhere to 15 this 2-year period or 30 this 2-year period, 30 this 2-year period. As long as you had your 60 in your 4 years and maintained your current certification, we as the board can simply go online and see that you are current and active and know that you're up to date, reasonably up to date on your certification and your CEUs. You might have only 13 in this 2-year period and then 17 in the next. But as long as it added up at the end of the 4 years, that was adequate. I know in some states like Massachusetts, I was looking at their laws this morning. The dates must follow exactly. You take extra CEUs before they're required. Well, that was good for you, but it doesn't help. Here, it was actually allowing a lot more flexibility as well as an ease on the board of checking the CEU status of somebody rather than requiring us to look through every single applicant's, every single CEU submitted.
But if we took the requirement for current active, the board presumably could still, for people who do have current active certification, look at that for the education requirement.
Yes, and we're
So
not
the-
looking for that to be the only way. We were simply looking to add that as an easiest way.
Okay,
Yep.
but taking the words out of there, I don't think will affect.
I have a suggestion that I hope would make everybody happy. Why don't we create 3 ways? We can have current active NCC AOM certification, which is probably what you're going to do most of the time. We have or equivalent certification approved by the board, which means you can develop something else. And we can put in the middle or prior NCC AOM certification with documentation of continuing education pursuant to RSA 328G:9X, which is the part we just talked about. Would that work for everybody?
I think it's fine, but it's also redundant.
Yes, it's redundant. It's boots and it's suspenders and belt. That works sometimes. If it gets everybody to yes, and we can stop arguing about it, I'm happy to do that.
I just want to say that we actually have a very good CEU policy in New Hampshire that if you take more than the amount, you can apply them next year. I don't know any other state that does that, and that definitely helps people. So I just want to inject some,
So I just want to make sure I understand. The board is
Yeah.
now going to be responsible for setting up the guidelines for an entire system of standards that meet NCC AOM for the state of New Hampshire specifically?
No, we're giving you the option that if somebody comes in with a prior certificate that is not currently active and evidence that they've kept up with their continuing education, which you already have a policy on and it's elsewhere in the law, that then you can accept that for licensure.
Okay, that was the third option, but the second one in between with the or
The
board
third one is or
approved
equivalent certification, which means that if you guys want to, you can come up with some other pathway in the rules that you consider to be equivalent, and we are good with that.
Okay.
That sounds good.
So I think that we have it. Yeah. My last question is, Tony, would you prefer that I do this amendment as a replace all and contain all of the language of the original bill, or do it as just a contingency that can take effect right after the other bill to just make the changes?
I would suggest it just be easier to see the changes if it only included, it basically became an amendment that just added the change, 282 with the changes we're discussing today,
That would
and took effect later.
That would be my preference, and I'm happy to do it that way. I'll just go down to OLS and do it.
Great, thank you. Yes?
This is just, I don't know if this is concerning, but what if someone was licensed here in New Hampshire, they went through the NCCOM certification, then they took maybe 20 years away from practicing, and now they want to be renewed again? Is that then they'd have to show like 30 CEUs and that they were once, certified by NCCOM?
My
any concern?
understanding is that your policy currently is 30 CEUs per year with some flexibility so you can shift things from one year to another. So if somebody took a 10-year break, that means that they would have to come up with 300 CEUs, which I suppose they could do if they really worked at it.
Okay. I think that makes sense. Thanks. Just double.
Okay, and what I'd suggest is if everybody who has an interest in this could leave an email address, then maybe we can, let them see a copy of the amendment. And
I would be glad to circulate it to a list if people give me a list of email addresses.
right, and just a last check to make sure.
That way, if there's a sudden panic, you guys can send me an email and I can correct it.
Yeah, Jack, if you could have your notebook with their sign up and let them add emails somehow.
If you could write down your email in my book, that'd be great.
the point that I made during testimony, which you weren't here the other day, is most people will probably keep their NCCM active, but some people want the choice. They don't feel like the NCCM represents them. Also, the NCCAOM is a trade association or they're a certifying body. Either way, they're a test agency that acts as a trade association technically. And many of us feel very uncomfortable about the salaries that they make, considering what acupuncturists make when we don't feel like they represent us. So some people, I'm probably going to continue with my active certification with them, but I know several people in New Hampshire who don't want to.
I can tell you that physicians feel exactly the same way
Okay,
about their
okay.
licensing boards. So
Okay.
you are not alone in that feeling.
And this isn't new. I heard similar things from my father, who was a doctor. Okay, is there, other than getting email addresses, is there any other points anyone wants to raise? Either on the subcommittee or not?
I believe that if we make an amendment before the meeting, we're going to have to meet again to pass the amendment as a subcommittee. But we can do that in 1 second.
Right,
before
so,
so let's, yeah.
right, so I guess we're meeting, the whole committee is meeting, we've got a number of meetings coming up.
Monday and Tuesday of next week.
Right, so
If I
Monday,
put in the amendment now, we'll have it on Monday.
right,
so-
we could do it Monday or just to leave some time in case we're meeting on Tuesday, so I could ask them to schedule, also needs to be some notice for the subcommittee work session. So I could put in a request to schedule one for 9:30 in the morning on Tuesday.
That would be fine.
Okay.
So I recommend that the people who are attending the subcommittee meeting look at the amendment and then send your comments to the chair so that we have one depository for all the comments.
Or send it to the whole committee email address, so we'll see it as well.
Oh, okay. All right.
Um,
Yep.
And if the amendment is ready on Monday and it gets emailed out sometime Monday, then there'd be a chance to add any comments before we vote on it Tuesday morning. And then the whole committee could vote on it on Tuesday as well, I suppose. And I'd ask if there are any comments on it, given the time frame, if it's not a substantial issue, I'd rather not go through this again because we're going to run out of time. So, but if there's something seriously broken, then yeah, hopefully not.
It's gonna be the 18th, right? The 18th in the morning.
Let me look at my calendar. 19th, that's Tuesday.
9:30.
Yep. And I'll send the email right after this requesting that be scheduled. So, all right, if there's nothing else, I will close the subcommittee work session on Senate Bill 282.